Okay, so now we get to one of the worst stories in all the Bible. So we had 10 chapters of basically a successful account of Israel's faithful dealings with God. Now I've had a couple of chapters now talking about their grumblings with God. They were not completely faithful. When they actually left the camp at Sinai and started journeying, apparently the trip was hard and annoying and they didn't really like doing it and they started grumbling along the way. But now we're going to come to one of the big failures in all the Bible. These next couple of chapters are extremely important, and the example and precedent that's going to be set here is going to ring out throughout the corridors of time, all throughout the rest of the Bible, as one of the all-time examples of unfaithfulness of the people of God, not trusting God to do for them what he said he was going to do. The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each ancestral tribe, send one of its leaders." Now, in Deuteronomy, they're going to recount this again, and Moses is going to say he did this at the request of the people. So, again, you see this kind of blurring of human agency and divine authority. You know, did the Lord tell them to do this? Did the Lord consent to allow them to do this because the humans wanted to do it? Did the Lord tell them to do this and then the humans, it's hard to say. It's like there's two different accounts of this. It's kind of written from both perspectives, and it's hard to know exactly how they blend together. So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them out from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites. These are their names. And now this could be considered like the Hall of Shame right here. These are names that were not used again in future generations of Hebrew. Their day and time, you would repeat the same names over and over to a large degree. When John the Baptist is born and circumcised and has his public debut, they give him the name, and the mother Elizabeth says his name is John, and they don't believe her. They don't think she's right about that because there isn't anybody else in her family with the name of John. It takes the deaf and mute father to write down on a tablet that his name is John. For the rest of the people, they don't take the mother's word for it, of course. She's just a crazy, hysterical woman. It takes a father writing down on a tablet his name is John for them to accept that. The reason why they didn't really believe the woman, in addition to just not believing women in general, is that there was no one else in their family with the name of John. Because why would you name someone some other name? It's like the idea of repeating names after someone else in the family or something along those lines was just, that was what they did. Okay, these names don't get repeated. This is the Hall of Shame right here. These are the names that you're not going to name your baby boy after. These next 10 names. There are 10 of these next 12 names are not names that you're going to repeat or name your baby boy after this story happens. So these are their names. From the tribe of Reuben, Shemuah, son of Zachar. From the tribe of Simeon, Shaphat, son of Hori. From the tribe of Judah, Caleb, son of Jephunneh. You will hear the name Caleb, though. From the tribe of Issachar, Igal, son of Joseph. From the tribe of Ephraim, Hoshea, son of Nun. That's actually Joshua. But it says down here, Joshua gave the name Hoshea the name Joshua. Moses gave Hoshea the name Joshua. From the tribe of Benjamin, Palti, son of Raphu. From the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, son of Sodi. From the tribe of Manasseh, the tribe of Joseph, Gadi, son of Susi. From the tribe of Dan, Amiel, son of Gemali. From the tribe of Asher, Sether, son of Michael. From the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, son of Voshi. From the tribe of Gad, Gael, son of Maki. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. By the way, Jesus' name really is Joshua. When we say the name Jesus in English, that name ultimately traces itself back to this word, this name Joshua. So we could very easily call Jesus Josh, because that actually is his name. Jesus has the same name as this guy Joshua does. Basically meaning he saves. One of the evidences of this book's antiquity, of course, is the fact that these names were not repeated in later generations. You look back at ancient Near Eastern records and you don't find names like these in the copies and stuff, materials that we have, or in the rest of the Old Testament. This is a clue that this text really does go back a long ways, because these names died out after this disastrous event and weren't used again in their culture. A lot of people will try to tell you this stuff, of course, was written about 1,000 years after it actually was. But if that were the case, these names wouldn't be so. These names would be different names. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, "Go up through the Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad?" We know it's good because God said so. "What kind of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it or not? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land." It was the season for the first ripe grapes. Oh my. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob toward Lebo Hamath, so from south to north. They went up through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ariman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Now, this is an interesting little. I'm going to take a moment here to talk about this. I don't know. Well, let's mention it now. I probably won't come back to it later. Zoan in Egypt is actually the name of the Egyptian capital at this time. We never got that name in the account of the Exodus itself. But Zoan is the name of the city where Pharaoh was living in Exodus. Zoan had been the capital of the dynasty of pharaohs ever since Joseph. And it was up in the northern region near Goshen, but not in the land of Goshen, just near it, where the Israelites spent that whole time. So if you wonder why this weird, I've said before, one of the things we should always ask ourselves is why some of these lines and stories are included. If you wonder why this weird sentence is thrown in there about Zoan in Egypt, well, Zoan, even though Exodus itself never gave that name, Zoan was actually the capital of Egypt during this time period. So if you want to look for the right pharaoh of the Exodus and the oppression and the Exodus, we need to find somebody whose capital was in Zoan. And we need to make sure we know what Zoan is. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. Eshcol means cluster. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them. They like carrying things on poles. They were big on poles. Along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. It took them that long to get up and come back down again, basically. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. "We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. We even saw descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country, and the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan." Then Caleb, one of these 12 guys, silenced the people before Moses and said, "We should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, "The land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there." The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seem like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we look the same to them. Now, they're exaggerating here. I'm sure they're exaggerating. They're not really talking about people who are 15 feet tall or whatever. Um, but they are talking about fortified cities that would have required effort to build. Remember, this is an interesting little detail connecting back to the beginning of Exodus. Pharaoh was afraid of the Israelites because he thought they would join with Egypt's enemies when Egypt's enemies took up arms against Egypt. Well, what was Pharaoh afraid of? Now, obviously, he didn't need to be afraid of them because these people were wimps. Okay, he did not need to be afraid the Israelites would do this. They were not going to do it. But he was afraid of that. Why was he afraid of that? Well, he was afraid of that because at this time, the cities in Canaan, which is to his east, northeast, were getting fortified. The cities in Canaan were becoming strong. They were not that way in the past, but they were becoming that way in his day. In the days of Joseph and Jacob, when they moved down to Egypt, it was not that way. But in the days of Moses, when the new Pharaoh comes into power 100 or so years after Jacob, it was that way. Those cities in Canaan were becoming fortified. And that made the rulers of Egypt nervous. It made them nervous about those cities out there in those extra lands, and it made them nervous about the large group of foreign people they had living in their own land who might join with those other people from that area, because they were from that area originally. So that's why they put them in slaves, and that's also why those pharaohs built all those fortifications and fortresses along the way from Egypt to Canaan, the area of Canaan. So these cities now are fortified, which they hadn't been before. When Abraham and Isaac and Jacob were living in the land before, they wouldn't have been fortified, but they are now. And so that's also what made the pharaohs of Egypt nervous about invading. Egypt saw the other lands, of course, as ancient people did, and as people today still do, as being subservient to them. Like Egypt's default way of thinking was that all the earth should be in subjection to Egypt, and in fact, Egypt would wage wars on other nations, and would call it like a war of subjecting the unruly usurpers to Egypt's rule, regardless of whatever the cause of the war was. Like whatever Egypt, Egypt didn't even need to be a cause. A pharaoh could just simply go into another country and attack that country, and he would justify it as being, well, these people are in rebellion against me, whether or not they really were. So these city-states in Canaan building these walls and developing these fortifications as a threat to Egypt, which is why the pharaohs got nervous in the first place. And then they got nervous about the people who were living in their land, who were from that area originally, joining with those people in case a war ever does break out. So that's why they enslaved the Israelites who were there. So these cities are fortified. That much is true. And there are Nephilim there. The Nephilim just mean the fallen ones. It just the word Nephilim, as we talked about when we got through Genesis 6, just means the word fallen ones. It doesn't refer to any sort of special human angel hybrid. I mean, these it says here the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. It just means that they're fallen ones. They are enemies, obstacles, people that need to be removed from the story before Israel, for Israel. There are people who are in the story for Israel to defeat, basically. They're enemies, they're fallen ones. They exist in the story basically to be dealt with and done away with. That seems a little unfair, maybe, but that's what that word actually is. That's what they're for. It doesn't mean that they're some sort of human angel hybrid monster thing. And they may be big. They may have been physically bigger than the Israelites. That's possible, but it wasn't. These spies are exaggerating the report of that. That night, all the people of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt, or in this desert! Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and our children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt." This is as bad as it gets. We've heard them grumbling, we've heard them complaining, but now they're outright mutinous. Now they're going to actually choose another leader and go back. They've had enough of this. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, "The land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will swallow them up. Their protection is gone, for the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them." But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. Then the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the Israelites. The Lord said to Moses, "How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them?" These are the same people who saw all the plagues of Egypt, who saw the Red Sea, the crossing of the Red Sea, who crossed the Red Sea and saw it wipe out the Egyptian army. They were at Mount Sinai for a year. They saw the glory of the Lord come down the mountain and then come down and take up residence in the tabernacle they built. And the cloud and the cloud has been going with them by day and by night since then. And they've seen all of this. This is not a matter of faith for them. This is a matter of their own sight and experiences. They have lived through this. They have seen it. They have heard the Lord's voice. They have seen his presence. They have seen the effects of his presence. They've seen his power. They have seen repeated displays of his power. You cannot ask for any more evidence and confirmation of God's power and presence than these people had. It was not a matter of faith with them. They were told, in fact, by Moses to tell their sons and tell their sons after their sons and their sons after their sons that I saw this happen. When your son asks you why you do these things, why you commemorate these rituals, why you eat this bread at Passover and commemorate these other rituals, you're to tell him this is what the Lord did for me. He didn't see this stuff. Your son wasn't around, and your grandson. And remember, their word for son meant everything. They had one word which they used for all that stuff. Okay, Ben, I think it was. That meant son, grandson, great-grandson, all the way down the line. That one word did all that work. So when your son, who did not see this stuff, comes along and asks you why you do this, you reply to him because of what the Lord did for you, because you did see this stuff. Of course, that generation is going to die out eventually anyway. So the story will be passed down through the experiences of these people who did see this stuff. So for them, it was not a matter of faith over sight. They saw this stuff. They experienced it. It was in their memory banks. And it wasn't enough. All of that, everything they've been seeing since the time Moses came back to them from his exile out in the desert for 40 years, all of that was not enough for these people. In the end, that was not enough. When it came time for them to do something, and the Lord had not been asking them to do much until now, but now the Lord is asking them to take up arms and go into an enemy-controlled nation and actually fight those people. Now that that's being asked of them, all the stuff they have seen about the Lord's power and presence was not enough. How long will they refuse to believe in me in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them, but I will make you into a nation greater and stronger than they. He said this once before with the golden calf incident back in Exodus. And he's saying it again. He can still fulfill his promises to Abraham by working through Moses and his descendants. And maybe these other guys, Aaron, Caleb, and Joshua, maybe them too, maybe. He doesn't have to keep the rest of them around just to fulfill his promises to Abraham. He can still do it through Moses alone. Moses said to the Lord, "Then the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power you brought these people up from among them, and they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. They have already heard about you, that you, O Lord, are with these people, and that you, O Lord, have been seen face to face, that your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night." So they already know this. The Egyptians know this. The people living in Canaan know this, and this word has already been spread. If you put these people to death all at one time, the nations who have heard this report about you will say, the Lord was not able to bring these people into the land he promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the desert. Now again, God knows all this stuff. He doesn't need Moses to tell him this. Excuse me. But by making this declaration, he is again giving Moses an opportunity to intercede for the people on their behalf. Now may the Lord's strength be displayed just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion. Yet he does not leave the guilty unpunished. He punishes the children for the sin of their fathers to the third and fourth generation, those children who commit the same sins as their fathers. The next generation won't commit the same sins as this generation. Look how close, but they won't do it. So they don't get held accountable for these sins because they don't follow those same sins. So he doesn't charge the next generation with the sins of this one. But if you continue the sins of your fathers, he'll charge you with those sins too. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sins of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. The Lord replied, I have forgiven them, as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of the men who saw my glory and the miraculous signs I performed in Egypt and in the desert, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times. I don't necessarily know if that means a literal 10 times. If you go back and count all the times they grumbled and complained, maybe it'll be 10. I'm not sure if that number is literally 10. 10 is a complete number because you have 10 fingers. 2 hands, 10 fingers. So 7 and 10 are numbers that are often used symbolically. In this case, it probably is. There may be actually 10 separate accounts of grumbling before this. I haven't counted them. But I wouldn't read too much into that 10 figure there. Not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their forefathers. No one who has treated me with this contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Since the Amalekites and Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route to the Red Sea. So that's it. They're not going to get to go in there. He was all set to bring in the land right here and now. You didn't think he was going to do it. You didn't think he could do it. So go back. We'll try again in 40 years. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. In this desert your bodies will fall. Every one of you 20 years old or more who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me. Not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun. He doesn't even make an exception for Moses and Aaron here. That's going to be an interesting little thing to come along later. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I'll bring them in to enjoy this land that you have rejected. But your bodies will fall in this desert. Your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness until the last of your bodies lies in the desert. For 40 years, one for each year, each of the 40 days you explored this land, you will suffer for your sins, and you will know what it is like to have me against you. I, the Lord, have spoken, but I will surely do these things to this whole wicked community, which is banded together against me. They will meet their end in this desert. Here, they will die. So the men Moses had sent, so he's going to give them what they want. He was going to give, it's better for them to die in the desert. You know what? They're going to die in the desert. That's what they said. They said it would be better for them to die in the desert than to go into that land. And guess what? They're going to die in the desert. In the end, God will give us what we want. Even if we really don't want it. When we actually get it, we may not want it. But in the end, God will let us have what we want. If we're just that determined to fight Him, He's not going to insist. He's not going to insist that we let Him have His way with us. If we fight Him tooth and nail up to the very end, He will let us have what we want. And of course, we're probably going to find out at the end that we really don't want it. And that's what He's doing here. We'll see this principle applied a lot in the scriptures in books to come. But God is very consistent about dealing with man that way. So the men Moses had sent to explore the land, who returned and made the whole community grumble against him by spreading a bad report about it. These men responsible for spreading the bad report about the land were struck down and died of a plague before the Lord. So they're the first ones who are going to go. All of them are going to go. All 600,000 plus are going to go. It's going to take 40 years to kill some of them off. But these 10 guys are going to go right now. They're going to be the first to go. Of the men who went to explore the land, only Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, survived. When Moses reported this to all the Israelites, of course, it could be that takes place over a span of time. I mentioned before that chronology and narrative in these Hebrew stories is sometimes hard to parse through. There's a possibility that could be referring to something that happened over a long period of time. It may not have happened all at once. But in the context here, it seems to me like it's happening all at once. They're the first to go. Moses will actually be the last to go. It's kind of hidden here, but God is not making an exception for Moses and Aaron here either. The only two people He's making an exception for are Caleb and Joshua. Of this generation, those are the only two guys who are going to make it in. Even Moses and Aaron won't. So we get an early hint at Moses and Aaron's ultimate fate here too, because they are not listed as being among the exceptions. So these 10 guys presumably were the first 10 of the 600,000 to go, and Moses will actually be the last. When Moses reported this to all the Israelites, they mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they went up toward the high hill country. We have sinned, they said. We will go up to the place the Lord promised. So now they're going to try to take the land anyway. But Moses said, "Why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This will not succeed. Do not go up, because the Lord is not with you. You will be defeated by your enemies. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites will face you there. Because you have turned away from the Lord, He will not be with you, and you will fall by the sword." So you're making a bad situation worse. This is a bad situation. Okay? There is no way to put a positive spin on this. This is as bad as it gets. This is as bad as I think it ever gets. I mean, 600,000 people plus here now have literally no hope for their lives. This is as bad gets. You can't get any lower than this. And there's no way around it. There's no appeal to God now to show mercy on you. He's made his mind up. He's made it clear what's going to happen. So now you're just making a bad situation worse. Nevertheless, in their presumption, they went up toward the high hill country, though neither Moses nor the Ark of the Covenants, nor the Ark of the Lord's Covenant moved from the camp. Then the Amalekites and Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah. So that's it. They messed up. When it came time for them to actually have to act on their faith, when the Lord actually required them to do something. Now, up until now, He really hasn't asked them to do much of anything. All He's really asked them to do is just like literally walk around following His cloud. I mean, in the end, that's what He's asked them to do. They didn't do anything during the plagues. They didn't really do anything during the Red Sea crossing, except just walk, just move, literally just move from one place to another. They didn't really do anything at Sinai. They've mostly just been kind of standing around, or walking. Now it's time for them to actually go into this land and fight for it. And He's going to make them fight for it. He is not going to just kind of let them waltz in without making an effort for it. They're going to actually have to fight these battles. The people who are there, they're actually going to have to drive them out. And that will take physical work on the Israelites' part. And that will involve a certain level of danger. we'll read the accounts of the battles when we actually get there in Joshua. But it's like God isn't necessarily, he's promising them that he'll give them the land. But he's not necessarily promising all 600,000 of those men that every single one of them is going to come back alive from the battles. And so they are now being asked to do something, to engage in war, to take this land. And that is just a bit too much for them. Despite all they have seen everything that anyone can see. They have seen all the plagues. They crossed the Red Sea. They saw the Egyptian army drown in the sea. They saw Mount Sinai. They saw the Lord dwelling at the mountain, and then coming in to dwell in the tabernacle. They've seen the cloud of pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. They have seen all of that. And that still was not enough. There are two generations in the Bible that are called out for their unbelief. This is one of them. The other one is the generation of Jesus, who got to experience Jesus during his ministry on earth, who saw God in the flesh on earth, interacted with him, saw him, heard him, saw what he did, heard what he said, and still rejected him. Now, in that case, some of them, of course, did not. The apostles did not. The members of the church did not. So there was a salvation for a group of people in that case. In this case, it's everybody, except for two guys. This entire generation, including Moses and Aaron, as it turns out, will not make it into the promised land. So there does come a point when our unbelief hardens such a degree that God is just going to let us go. In the end, God gave these people what they wanted. They said themselves it would have been better for us to die in the desert, and so God let them die in the desert. And there does come a point eventually when God just lets us go and say, if that's what you want to do, if that's how you want to do it, I'm not going to make you. I'm not going to make you follow me. I'm not going to make you do what I want you to do. And if you're just that determined not to, if you're just that determined to fight me about it, I'm going to let you have what you want. I think a lot of times then we'll find out we really didn't want that, but that's what's going to happen. And that's what happened here. And this example is going to be pointed back to in scriptures for all the pages to come. We're going to see the prophets mention it, the apostles in the New Testament mention it. This is going to be one of the prime example, really, of unbelief and unfaith, an unfaithful people that ultimately just, despite seeing everything they've seen and experienced everything they've experienced and having all of that personal first-hand experience to draw from, it still was not enough for them. And we got to make sure that we are not like that. That's the lesson. That's the takeaway.